Hey there, this is PJ. It is Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. I'm in my office and today is Ash Wednesday, so I am going to present to you the sermon that I'm going to be presenting over there in the sanctuary for our Ash Wednesday service. So this evening, we gather in the holy space for Ash Wednesday. Believers all over the world are gathering in their sacred spaces and have or will be receiving ashes today. The Christian faith has been practicing this ritual for about 1400 years. Remember, man, that thou art dust, and to dust you shall return. Ash Wednesday is the beginning of the Christian Lenten season. The Lenten journey is a 40-day journey before Easter. Sundays are not counted. Today is a day that we dedicate ourselves to the following three aspects of living: reflection, repentance, and self-denial. This evening, we did not hear the temptation story of Jesus. The temptation of Jesus lasted for 40 days. Thus, the biblical rationale for the period of Lent lasting 40 days. Our gospel reading this evening, however, does not launch the Lenten season with that story of temptation. That story is reserved for Sunday. Instead, tonight, we heard a teaching of Jesus. The discourse of his teaching in Matthew 6 focuses in on three practices, and they are the following: benevolence, prayer, and fasting. Now, if you were paying close attention to the gospel reading, and in particular what verses we were reading, you would have noticed that we skipped a number of verses. Anytime that this occurs, I think that it is good to at least know what was skipped and speculate on the reason that they were skipped. The verses that are omitted on the words of Jesus share before and after the Lord's Prayer. Thus we speculate, why did the lectionary folks decide to omit the Lord's Prayer? Maybe they thought that we as preachers would simply focus in on the prayer, or we can take a radical guess and say that we are reminded that prayer alone, especially public prayer, is not a sufficient indicator of rightness when the following three things are lacking. These three things are benevolence for others, private prayer, and voluntary moderation. Lately in my sermons, I have been speaking of hard truth. I had an individual share with me that they like when I give hard truths, even though they make them squirm a little in the pew. So, here is today's Ash Wednesday's hard truth. The ashy mark that we wear on our foreheads today are pointless if we do not accept the challenges of Jesus. The biggest challenge, in my opinion, about Ash Wednesday is committing oneself to service of others and to be content with obscurity. Did you hear that word? Serve. Serve all people, following the example of Jesus. Yesterday in our Bible study, serve was a key word. We looked at how we might serve. I really want us to look at our baptismal promises and follow the example of Jesus and serve all people. In our study, we talked about giving up something for Lent, what we have done or experienced in the past. There was also a discussion about flipping it, and instead of giving up something, you take up something. You take up something that is positive. Maybe you can accept the challenge on writing an individual a day, an uplifting handwritten note, and sending it to them through the mail. I briefly shared yesterday with the six that gathered that in 2009 that I gave up coffee for Lent. I did not share the whole story with them, so here is the whole story. Pastor Nathan, who was the senior pastor at the time, asked me to never do that again. I think he thought that I looked pitiful for such a noble sacrifice. So maybe you have been toying with the idea of giving something up for Lent. If you do, could you do it cheerfully? Maybe you and I could see the joy in getting unattached or less attached to those earthly treasures that we love so dearly. I think most of the things that we give up for a 40-day or 46 days, if you do the Sunday's adventures, it is short-term or short-lived. James Howard shares it this way. Lent can begin with good intentions, but then fritters away into nothing at all. A season of investment in the treasury of heaven can happen, evidently, only as it withdraws from the treasures we have been banking on earth. This is a hard lesson, one only in prayer, solitude, and humility. These three words are words that we'll take a look more in depth at on Sunday as we listen in to the story of Jesus and his temptation. So let me close out today with this final thought. Our calling that we hear on this first day of Lent is to live out what is good, just, and helpful, because in that way we join Jesus on his journey. Are you ready for the journey to begin?